And I'm wearing my Missing Movies hat today, which is to say that the three of us are board members of a not-for-profit that we've just created in the last couple of years that is dedicated to making sure that our movie heritage doesn't disappear. The very, very quick origin story, just to kick things off here, is that I wanted to have a screening of a film called Household Saints.
Oh yeah.
That was produced by Rich, directed by Nancy, who's sitting over there, and this was going to take place at Columbia University. We tried to find a copy of the film to show, and the only copy we could find was a VHS cassette. The film had never been released on DVD or Blu-ray. It was not available for streaming, and the only 35mm prints were damaged. So it began this long process where Rich and Nancy, with the help of several other people, finally tracked down the rights, finally got materials, and as you may or may not know, the film was re-released this year. It's now showing in theaters. Is it currently available on DVD? Is it right?
It is currently available on Blu-ray and DVD, and I believe it's streaming as well.
Streaming, okay, there you go. So this particular story has a happy ending, but what we realized is that there were a lot of movies that were in the same potential jeopardy of completely disappearing. And in particular, there's an era that lasts from the late 60s all the way through the 90s of independent cinema that's particularly fragile because of the way that these films were financed, which brought together large numbers of parties to chip in to actually make them, and then where are the materials and where are they left and who went out of business and who was sold to who, and it just becomes this nightmare. So we create, out of that information, that was what caused us to create this not-for-profit called Missing Movies, and all three of us are on the board. So we're going to start out by showing you a little sizzle reel that we put together that just shows you a little bit about what we're all about.
No, a couple of those films, since we cut this trailer, have reappeared. And that's kind of part of the story, is that movies sort of come and go in terms of accessibility. So.
And I might add that when we first got started, we just, for the sake of trying to make a list, we just looked at the films that were at Sundance, at the film festival, for the first 20 years of its existence. And of those films, hundreds of them were completely out of circulation, just to give you an idea of how serious the problem is. So I'm gonna turn to Rich, and just, if you can talk a little bit about what is a missing movie, which, by the way, we've spent an enormous amount of time talking about this, and we don't have a real answer, but...
I mean, I think the answer, I'll say there's no definitive answer. For me, it's not accessible. If I want you to go and see New York, New York right now, yes, it's going to be screening at the festival, but you can't go stream it. You can't tell somebody you saw it at the festival, hey, you should check this out. Oh, it's not there. So the definition is a little bit flexible. It does, movies do come, so Criterion will release something and it'll be on their channel, or Kino will release something. I mean, I said Household Saints is now streaming. I don't know how long it will be streaming. That is not my decision. So, you know, when you look at this, the streaming landscape, there was a recent article about if you are a cinephile, you really want to subscribe to Amazon Prime because they had 12,000 titles. 12,000 titles sounds like a lot, except that anybody who remembers King's Video Store, they had 60,000 titles. And the greatest video store of all time was Netflix when they were sending us DVDs. They had 110,000 titles. So if you took all the streaming landscape right at this moment, there's probably 25,000 titles streaming versus 110. Where did the other 85 go? So theatrical and like things like art house cinemas, they are a way to not lose these movies, absolutely. But again, it's a one-time screening or it's a weekend screening, and you know, again, I'll repeat, you cannot turn to someone and say you should see this. And of course, when I tell my kids that they can watch something and it's on DVD, it's like, what? You know, how am I going to see it? You know, I don't have it. Who's got a DVD player? Who has a DVD player? I'll look at you guys. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
I actually have 2 VHS.
Right. Yeah. But you know, but anyway, so we have ourselves struggled with the definition. On our advisory board, we have preservationists, we have archivists, we have exhibitors, and you know, again, you know, I showed Looking for Mr. Goodbar 5 years ago. Great, but it's missing today to me. So you know, we like I said, we've really gone back and forth on that definition. But I think that's, to me, it's accessibility.
So I want to turn to Jeffrey for a minute. First of all, we haven't properly introduced you. This is Academy Award-winning screenwriter Jeffrey Fletcher. You know, as a screenwriter, obviously you are not on the same kind of front lines in terms of fighting for these movies to be in circulation or whatever, but you joined our board because you really care about this mission. And maybe you could talk a little bit about what it is that interests you about this and why you think this is so important.
Sure. I'd love to start with a quote that I think is relevant to what we're talking about for a lot of reasons. And that quote is, to me, the only success, the only greatness is immortality. And it was spoken by one of Robert DeNiro's heroes. Does anyone know who said that? It's James Dean. And within that short quote, I think there's a lot that relates to what we're going to talk about. In addition to, you know, him being one of DeNiro's heroes, it references time, it references greatness. And a lot of times we're always trying to define greatness, and usually we do it by awards or reviews or box office. But I think that there's a much, much more important measure of all of those things. Does anyone know what that might be? I know you guys didn't come here for a quiz, but time. It's time. Because so many times we lather so much praise upon things, but there are things that weren't appreciated in their time, that stand the test of time. And another quote that I think relates to that is from Roger Ebert. One of the greatest things ever said about movies is that they're empathy machines. So, if you lose one of these movies, you're losing an empathy generator. And not only that, you know, they're made to inspire people as well. You know, a horrific thought is losing the Mona Lisa, right? But that's the work of one person. If you lose a movie, it's the work of dozens, if not hundreds of people. But the downstream effects, no pun intended, but you can inspire others way, way down the line. You know, this is a group that I sense really loves films. And I think about The Umbrellas of Cherbourg. Imagine a lot of you have seen that. Dreyer's Joan of Arc, or Kathleen Collins' Losing Ground. And you know, those films are almost, we didn't have them. And Jacques Demy, who did Umbrellas of Cherbourg, also did Lola. So Lola and Joan of Arc were lost in fire. And, you know, we found a print of Lola at the BBC, and they ultimately found the original cut of Joan of Arc in a closet of a mental institution in 1981. And, you know, that's considered to have featured perhaps the greatest performance by an actor on screen of all time, Maria Falconetti, I believe. So, I think how valuable these things are and how much they meant to me. And when I came to New York for film school, I'd go to Kim's Video all the time. I felt like the whole world opened up to me. In the daytime, I'd go to classes, and at night, I'd study with Kurosawa and Truffaut and Bergman and the rest. And it really can't be underestimated how important these things are. There are great movies made today, of course, but these films, they're really all children of these remarkable films that I know changed my life personally, and probably a lot of people in this room.
All right, well, I think what we're going to try to do now is go into the details of a few examples of the sorts of things we're talking about. And the first one we want to talk about, I can't read this.
Rights issues.
Rights issues. Oh, this goes back to you, Rich. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things to remember when you were asking, well, how does a movie go missing? Well, it can go missing in a lot of ways. I mean, missing in the sense of there were no prints. As Ira said, all we had was a VHS copy to screen. We still had a VHS copy, right? But you know, materials can be totally lost, and there are so many stories about movies. One of our advisory board members, David Sten, was talking about a Lon Chaney movie called The Unknown that had completely gone. You know, no one could find it anywhere. It was a studio that actually had made it, but they couldn't find it until one day, fairly recently, they were looking in the back of the deep space in the vault, wherever that was, and there were these cans, and it said Unknown. And they were like, wonder what this is. And it's like, no, it's The Unknown. It's that movie. So materials go missing constantly. Then the other thing that happens is rights are confused. Or, as Ira said, part of what happened, especially in the 90s, this was true where home video, all these companies rushed in to make these movies, but the financing was extremely complicated. Household Saints was a movie that had 4 different companies involved, including this equity investor who, part of the deal was they walked away with the copyright, but then he decided not to get involved in movies anymore. And so, and then the company was dissolved, he passed away, and all I had left 30 years later was an estate lawyer in Colorado Springs. And when I called him, and this financier had done 2 movies, The Secret of Rowan Inish, which was a great John Sayles movie that you should check out. I don't know if it's streaming, but you can find it. You can find out. But when I called this estate attorney and I explained what I was calling for, he said, "What? There's another one?" A lot of these companies do not know that they have the rights, and sometimes you're in a position of having to prove to them that they have the rights. And we've been in that situation with, I believe it's The Heartbreak Kid. They needed proof from someone outside to understand they had the rights. So, what else?
All right.
So,
So these are examples of some of the movies that we were led to believe are either somewhat not available or somewhat available or not available at all or whatever. But what we're going to do is talk about a couple of them just to kind of kick things off here. The first one we're going to talk about is New York, New York. I'm sure, how many of you have seen New York, New York? Okay. How many of you have seen the version that actually has the happy endings number in it? Okay. I worked at United Artists back in the late 70s when New York, New York was first released. And what happened was that the studio was very upset with Scorsese because the film was really long. It was really long. And so he couldn't think of anything to cut with the exception of this 12-minute scene that comes out of the blue toward the end of the movie and is this Busby Berkeley-like production number. And he just locked it out because it was the only thing he could think of that he could pull out that wouldn't destroy the plot or whatever. When I was working at UA, several years after the film had been released and had not really done all that well, we actually re-released the film and put that happy endings number back in the film. And it actually was much better received. Interestingly enough, with that additional 12 minutes, the film seemed shorter. And the reason is because it's a lift toward the end of the movie. The movie, for those of you who've seen it, you know this, is kind of depressing, and this was a moment toward the end of the film where all of a sudden the spirit of the film came into focus in a very, very different way. So, long story short is that the movie gets released on DVD in both versions. It gets released on Blu-ray where the happy endings number is not incorporated into it, but rather is put in as an extra. And it's one of those situations, and I've encountered a number of these, where even though the various versions of it exist where you can get your hands on it if you try hard enough, the original negative material for that scene is nowhere to be found. So that's the reason why most of the versions that are out there do not include that number. So we're going to give you a little bit of a treat, which is to show you a tiny bit. I'm not going to show you the whole 12 minutes, but just a little taste of the happy endings number.
Pardon me, miss, I've a problem, and I wonder, would you help me? Lost my glove, and I could use your light.
Right.
I was leaving, it's so silly, but I guess I must have dropped it. All at once it seemed to disappear.
Here.
Gee, I'm grateful and I'd like to show you my appreciation. Maybe take you out to dinner. When do you get off? I can wait.
Oh, no, I couldn't
I
possibly.
can wait.
Well, I don't do that.
I can wait.
No,
I can wait.
8.
You sing here?
Sometimes, after work, relieves the stress.
You got stress?
Yes, I guess.
Hey, Peggy, you gonna sing tonight?
When Mr. Right comes along, every melody that sounded so wrong will be blended in a beautiful song. When Mr. Right
She's wonderful.
comes along.
That's great.
So it just keeps going like that. It's just a good example of something where, while the film itself is in circulation, there's versions of the film that are just not in general circulation. You may be familiar with the movie Stop Making Sense, which was a movie that I released in the 1980s. It was a film that was re-released by A24 in a newly restored version. And when they were trying to, when they were about to put out the new Blu-ray, they wanted to include 2 musical numbers that were never in the original movie, but had been on various home video versions of the film for a very long time. And because those versions were made before high definition existed, it means that the only versions of those 2 songs that were cut from the movie were standard definition, not high definition versions. And they could not find the original negative for those 2 clips, those 2 pieces of the movie. So it's another example of almost the exact same situation.
And you know, I just, my New York cultural reference, and I confess I do listen to sports radio occasionally. The couple, like 2 months ago, they were talking about this tradition at Yankee Stadium of playing New York, New York, the Sinatra version. And the hosts were guys in their late 40s or 50-ish, and they were saying, yeah, you know, that song is from, there was another version of that. Some woman did that, or a version of that, you know. And it was like they completely did not know the reference to the movie. They completely lost the fact that Liza Minnelli made it. I was fascinated by Ira saying that adding 12 minutes, and the spoiler alert, De Niro's not in the 12 minutes.
No. Well, he had this one cutaway in the middle of it, because what the scene is supposed to be is that Liza Minnelli becomes a big movie star.
Right.
And she's left De Niro, who was her lover. And during the happy ending sequence, there's one moment where it cuts to him in the audience at a theater watching the scene. So it's just a quick cutaway of him. I tried to see if I could include that part in the clip, but
it's interesting that Liza Minnelli gets cut out of that. Frank Sinatra makes the song, and Liza Minnelli's cut out of that. And I think that goes back to what Jeffrey was saying about, you know, let's guess who's going to be left out of history if we just let these movies slide. Right? It's the marginalized filmmakers. It's the, or you know, we know who the first to go are going to be. But in this case, with New York, New York, I mean, you know, we're throwing De Niro and Scorsese over with them by not having this movie available streaming. Why it's not available for streaming, I don't know. And that would be a long. The other reason movies go missing is what we generously call distributor indifference, with all due respect to our distributor up here.
former distributor.
So you have Night in the City, which is Irwin Winkler directed, and it's Jessica Lange and Robert De Niro. That's not streaming. I don't know why. You have it's Greetings, directed by Brian De Palma. Not streaming. I have no idea why. Would have to get into it, but I suspect it's a healthy dose of distributor indifference.
I also want to add, I think these films are so important because Raging Bull is unlikely to get lost, but if that film has the effect on you that it did on me and so many others, was that I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This is a movie that jumped out of the screen and worked its way around the room and grabs you. But if you're missing some of Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese's earlier works, I don't think your education is complete, because that film is an education for so many people. But let's say you're an actor and you want to have a career in the movies, and you look up to someone, rightly so, like Robert De Niro. If you see his early work and how devoted he was in those low-budget films where he wasn't making any money, De Palma wasn't making any money, and Scorsese wasn't making any money, that lesson is as important as his extraordinary craft on display in Raging Bull. So in order for you to really complete your education and your inspiration, those early films are so important.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about a movie where I'm trying to unravel the problems with it right as we speak. I'm going to try to keep this brief, although the story is so convoluted that it's going to be hard. But I produced a movie about 18 years ago that originally was called The Hairy Bird. None of you have heard of it, for a good reason, because what happened was that when the film was in post-production, Harvey Weinstein, of all people, saw one reel of the film. He was snuck the reel by one of the financiers of the film. As a result of that reel, he thought the movie was something very different than what was intended. And he bought the movie for a lot of money, and then began a process where he completely buried, destroyed the movie because it wasn't what he wanted it to be. We've heard a lot of stories like this, right? But the good news, the semi-good news, is that I found out just a couple months ago that the original distribution deal with Miramax had expired. And so I took it upon myself to start researching this to find out what we could do about getting this film not only back in circulation like we've been talking about, but also to restore the original director's cut of the film before Harvey got his scissors out. And what I discovered was, and this is where you start to hear about how complicated all of this is. The original financiers were a Canadian company called Alliance Atlantis. Alliance Atlantis sold itself many years ago to a company called Entertainment One. When that deal happened, they sold all the rights to their library to 5 different companies, depending on what sets of rights we were talking about. And this film was included in that library where one set of international rights went to one company, the Canadian rights went to another company, the US rights went to a third company, and then those companies went out of business and got inherited by other companies. So I've been tracing this back and back and back and back and back. I finally got to the point where I was able to figure out who I believe, to Rich's point, who I believe actually controls the rights to this movie, and I'm trying to buy it back from them. And they're not even 100% sure that they own the rights. So, you know, this is an example, and then the materials. There's one set of materials that are in a warehouse in Canada. There's another set of materials that are at Paramount, which took me a long time to figure that one out, because what happened was that when Miramax went out of business, their library was bought by a holding company that still calls themselves Miramax, but then they sold the North American rights to the Miramax library to Paramount. So when the Paramount deal, when the Miramax deal expired, Paramount no longer had the rights, so theoretically they reverted to Alliance Atlantis, but those people don't, the people who inherited those rights have no idea that they have them. So Paramount has a bunch of materials too, but that's the wrong version of the movie. That's the Miramax version that with all the Harvey Weinstein cuts. So I have to get to the Canadian vault to find the original materials to hopefully restore the movie to become what it originally was. And in the meantime, guess what? The movie's not available anywhere. So there you go. So that's just to give you an idea of how much research it takes sometimes to figure these things out.
And just very briefly, in my research, I was actually really happy because I literally went to Robert DeNiro's IMDb page. There are 159 different credits, which was amazing, and I spent a couple of hours doing some basic internet research. And the one film that came up that really struck me was something that was 2020. 2020, how is that possible? It's a movie called The Comeback Trail. And so here is the trailer. It's ironically about a movie that's not supposed to be released. So let's play that.
You're lying.
I swear to you, I'm not lying. I'm lying a little bit, but I'm a producer. That's what I do. And I will have your money in full, I promise you.
You got 72 hours. After that, I choke you to death.
Come on, I'm not an idiot. You haven't painted the most accurate portrait of our investor.
All right! We've been in trouble before. We always find a way out.
It's all over the street. You need money.
Why don't you guys come by the set? Frank Pierce is gonna be there.
Excuse me, Mr. Pierce. I'm so sorry to bother you. Can I get your autograph?
Frank Pierce was insured for $5 million.
This scumbag, he doesn't shoot a frame of film and he makes $5 million.
Well, how would you have felt if all you had to show for it was a lousy insurance check?
Look, I got a scam.
What do you mean a scam?
We make it look like we're actually going to be putting together a movie. We heavily insure the star who'll do his own stunts. You're Duke Montana?
Yeah, that's Duke Montana. What are you doing, Duke Montana?
My daily game of Russian roulette.
You are perfect for this particular part.
I really connected to the story.
Yeah, but Duke is like Western, you know, it's very masculine. Congratulations.
Bang! We kill him in a stunt, he's dead, and then we're rich. We're rich.
Action!
Duke Montana, if he were alive right now, I know he would be saying, "Where's that damn horse at?" Duke, my God, you're alive. You don't know this guy. He's got like 9 lives.
It's not that hard to kill somebody.
We're shooting this fantastic rope bridge scene. It's gonna be a real killer.
If it wasn't for you, I'd be 6 foot under up on Booth Hill right now. I'm gonna hunt you down.
These people are ready to die for you.
Not the best choice of words.
We in the business.
What kind of a human being are you?
Well, I'm a producer.
How is it a guy making $1 million movie don't have a better car?
I don't believe in ostentatious flamboyance.
What are you, stupid?
No.
So that one was really, that was really surprised me, and one of our board members, Dennis Doris, was able to actually track down the director of that film, and this, no pun intended, this has a happy ending. But what happened with this film was it was sort of a passion project to put together a whole group of investors, and they made the movie. They showed it to distributors. There was a bidding war. I'm not using any names of companies because there are certain issues that transpired. But there was a bidding war, and this company outbid everybody else, and they were going to set to release it, and then the pandemic hit. And so now they couldn't release it theatrically. They did release it in a somewhat shorter version. Again, we have another, 2 versions in Europe, so that if you go online, you can find the PAL DVD or PAL cassettes out there if you want to buy those, if you have those players. But so the financiers sued the distributor because they weren't releasing the movie. I think the distributor countersued. It was finally settled fairly recently where the financiers were actually able to buy back the film because then the distributor had expenses towards it. It wasn't just pay back the advance. The distributor had spent money. So the financiers got it back. They've got a new distributor, and we're told from the director that this will be out in the fall. It looks hilarious, so I can't wait to see it. But that's just another, circumstances that happen. I mean, you all have heard of a movie called Batgirl, right? Or have you heard of this movie? That Warner Brothers decided it was best to do a tax write-off instead of release the movie. It was cheaper that way. And so, who knows when that will ever be seen? Because of the way the tax law works with movies is a movie is an asset like a building, so it has to be written off over a period of years. But if you declare it worthless and don't release it, you can write it all off in 1 year. So Warner Brothers needed to get the write-off, so they just shelved the work of, hundreds and hundreds of people, including the filmmakers and the producers and the writers and the cast. I mean, when these movies go missing, it's not, as Ira said, it's not just one person's work. Mira Nair had this problem with Mississippi Masala, and it was Denzel Washington's, I think, his only romantic comedy performance. I can't think of another.
Reader's Life.
Okay, but again, a rare performance, a rare role that he took, and that was pretty much gone. Mira had a 35 print. There was only one of them in the world, but again, that was another happy ending. So there are happy endings to these things.
So Missing movies, just so you know, our job, we don't think of our job as being the ones who can literally save all these movies. There's just way too many of them. It would be impossible for us to tackle that job. However, what we are doing is what we're doing right now, educating people as to what the problem is. When I say people, obviously audiences, but also people in the industry, filmmakers who don't even realize that their films are in this kind of jeopardy. So a lot of the mission is about education. Some of it is about a different kind of education, which is educating filmmakers as to what they can do when they get into a situation like this. So we're trying to assemble case studies. We're trying to put together frequently asked questions that have to do with the rights situation, the technical problems, all those things, so that when a filmmaker finds themselves with a film that is no longer available, that they at least have some sort of roadmap as to how to deal with that situation. And then we are putting together a legal referral situation for pro bono legal for people who can't afford to hire lawyers to help them with these situations. That's a work in progress at the moment. What am I forgetting, Rich?
Well, I would just say on the education front, take one of these. The good news about, the bad news about the digital era is how many of us have files on hard drives and we have no idea where those hard drives are, or we don't have those cables anymore because they changed all the connections. Right? So, that's the bad news about the digital era. The good news is, when I got back all the materials from Household Saints, it was on pallets. That's how much stuff there was. 35 millimeter prints, interpositives, internegatives, audio tracks, all that stuff. Now, the digital age gives us the opportunity to save this stuff on drives, but more importantly on something called linear tape open, LTOs, which are digital tapes, which hold a tremendous amount of data. All of this is available for information in this pamphlet, and it's also on our website. So you should all take one and give one to a filmmaker because you can, what we're encouraging filmmakers to do is to start preserving your own work. Do it yourself, because you don't know where that stuff is going to go. And all these files, including the legal documents, everything, all those PDFs of those signed legal contracts can be on this drive, so you can have everything in one place. So that's what this is about, and I think that's it.
Okay, so we have one more little treat for you, and then we'll open up for questions. And this is just to show you that it's not just feature films that need to be preserved. So I'll let the piece speak for itself.
It doesn't take a lot of money to buy a 1970 Ambassador. It just looks like it does.
Hey, Ma! Pa! Joe's got a new car!
Boy, Joe, that's terrific looking. Hey, how do you like this big shot? Couple of years out of college and he's buying expensive cars.
Joey, you need such an expensive car.
CPAs make money. Right, Joe?
Hey, Mama, it didn't cost so much. Hey, Richie, get the sneakers off the seat, will you, please?
Ma! Joey got air conditioning!
Joey, so fancy.
Come on, the Ambassador comes that way. Hey, come on, let's go for a ride, huh?
Joey, the way I'm dressed.
You look beautiful. Come on.
Bravo, Joe.
Hey, Mrs. DeBoto, my son is air conditioned.
That's nice.
The Ambassador is still the only car in its class with standard air conditioning. That's class.
Bet none of you have seen that one before. Okay, so why don't we open up for questions? Anybody who wants to volunteer to be first? Okay, back there.
Hi, Coachman, I wanted to ask you, all the films did you go through also all the films you get distributed over the years and found, and how many did you find were actually missing or out of circulation, and you're trying to find that?
I mean, this is going to sound awful, but I've distributed hundreds of movies. I mean, literally hundreds of movies. There's no way that I would have the time to go back and look at all of those. The ones that I'm most invested in right now are the movies I've produced. And remarkably, you know, I used to pride myself on being somebody who really paid attention to stuff like this. So even when we first started with Missing Movies, I was thinking, well, you know, my movies are in good shape. You know, I did a good job. But as it turns out, maybe not as good a job as I thought, because as I've been dealing with them one by one, as the rights have expired, I'm finding out that, you know, one little technicality and one agreement is causing me issues. I was telling Rich earlier that another movie I produced, a film called Kiss Me Guido, Paramount again, our distribution agreement with Paramount expired just, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago. And when I called Paramount to follow up on that, they said, oh, our distribution agreement says that, you know, if we're not recouped on the film, then we get to keep it for another so many years. And I was like, well, has it recouped? And they were like, we don't know. I was like, well, maybe you should give me that information. I haven't received a producer statement in a couple of decades. And they were like, well, you're not listed as the entity that is, you know, on the original agreement. I had to come up with a document, which I had. I told you, I tried to do a really good job. I had a document that said that when we dissolved the company that produced the movie, that my company, my current company, took over the rights and the responsibilities of the film. I provided that to Paramount, and I'm still waiting for them to respond. I mean, just, you know, you can't win. Yeah, you had a question?
I did, and I think this can be, it's somewhat related to the topic here. When I was a kid, I would always, I'm 44, so when I was a kid, you know, VHS tapes were still very much in use, VHS cassettes and VHS recording of television. So if there was something showing on television, for a long time you could record it onto a VHS tape, or if there was something, even into the 2000s, if there was something showing on cable or television, you could record it for, you know, without fear of erasure, as far as I know, onto your DDR. And one of the things that I'm kind of noticing and hearing, I heard Mike Flanagan talk about this with his television shows on Netflix, that the access to creating your own copies of a lot of this streaming content is really, I'm not sure if there are obstacles being put up by streamers or by the government or others, but I keep on feeling like as I hear about streaming companies taking content off of their servers, that really they're not allowing the consumers any method anymore to preserve the film or the television show, for that matter, for themselves for future viewing. Do you see anything regarding that? What is your opinion?
That is, I mean, there is a technicality, there's a reason for that. There's something called the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which was passed right around the millennium, which makes it illegal to record even for personal use things from a digital file. So it's unlike the VHS era and the DVD era, where in theory you had the right to do that for personal use. That may change at some point, because I think people are worried about all of these things disappearing, and for good reason, because they are disappearing.
See, people laugh when you tell them that you have DVDs, right? Some people in here have done that, you can admit it. But when you have physical media, no one can control when or what you watch.
This is so important. I mean, it's exactly right. I collect DVDs, Blu-rays, and VHS cassettes if I know that that film is not available any other way, simply to make sure that there is a copy somewhere of that film. And there is a movement, you may realize that public libraries and university libraries and places like that, for a very long time, for purposes of preservation, were making digital copies from their DVD collections, etc., but only for preservation purposes. They're not allowed to do it for any other purpose. And they're now lobbying. They're trying to organize and lobby for what they call last copy protection, which is to say that they're trying to get inventories from every library around the country so that they know that there's at least one preserved copy of every movie that they can get their hands on. And that's really important work.
Oh, yeah. sorry.
Yeah, I tend to see things in revival theaters, like really good films. For instance, New York, they struck a new print recently, which I saw twice, and I've seen that many times over the years, the longer version, actually.
Yeah. That's probably left over from when we re-released it back in...
No, I think a few years ago,
Yeah.
they said a new print. Titus, Strange Days, Reading, all had like excellent 35mm prints. So if you didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yes. Sure.
I have a question in my head. I'm not sure I'll be able to articulate it well, so bear with me with this. But so, film is it's a physical medium, right? So it is inherently fallible and like mortal, right? And so you'd think that the advent of streaming would be the like solving of that, but it also seems to be like one of the inhibitors of like preserving film. So it's both. Do you see it as more one than the other, or is it like just going hand in hand? Does that make sense?
I mean, ideally, it would be preserved both ways.
Yeah.
There would be a physical copy of something somewhere. But think about how often the technology of storing something digitally has changed. And even these LTOs that Rich was referring to, which is the current way that people are archiving movies, digital movies, they recommend that every few years you create a new one.
Yeah.
You know, just because they're worried that it's gonna disappear.
Well, and again, as we all know with our phones, the operating systems keep being improved, and it keeps, suddenly things that used to work, software that used to work no longer works. So yeah, it's in theory it should help us preserve things, and it does. As I said, you can get all that information on this LTO, and the LTOs do have a shelf life of 10 to 20 years, as opposed to a hard drive, which is like 3 to 5 years.
And 35mm film, which was 100 years.
Right. Presuming you have the projector. I mean, yes, I know you can always shine light through, that's the famous thing, right? You shine light through the film, but you can't hear it. Yeah, I'm going to take you back there, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
This is a question for Ira. I'm producing a feature film for the first time, and you have such a wide range of experiences. I'm curious what kind of advice you would give for a producer.
Don't.
What if you lost your mind?
I've heard that before.
No, just kidding. Generic advice is kind of useless. I mean, it's all very specific. I mean, the generic thing would be, don't give up, just keep going at it. Don't listen to people who tell you what you're doing is impossible, because otherwise you'll never, you have to believe enough in what you're doing to want to just do it. And don't, try to be realistic. Which is sort of saying the opposite of what I just said, but realistic in the sense of that people dream about, if I only had just this much money, if I only had that much money. It's like, well, if you really need a ton of money to make a first film, then it's the wrong first film. You should probably stick that one in a drawer and make something cheaper first, and then build your way up to it, And I could go on like that all day in terms of little generic things, but those are not that helpful.
Well, maybe to rephrase it, I mean, what in your experience would you do differently, from the early producing that you did? Like what?
My story would not be applicable to most people. I worked for 30 years as a distributor before I produced my first film. So I already knew a lot of people, had a lot of contacts, so I had a much easier time transitioning into producing because of my experience in the business. So it's not really applicable to most people, unless you feel like working in distribution for 30 years.
I'm going to come over to the side here and get a question.
I got a question for all you guys. Now, speaking of A24 re-releasing Stop Making Sense and remastering it, I wonder how you guys feel about when you get lost movies, like a lot of the screens in New York show the original 35 millimeters, and sometimes these films are beat up, you see massive scratches. I think that's like a beautiful thing, like the Venus de Milo, like not having the arms off. Are you more concerned about restoring the film to the original vision, or preserving the film in all its flaws and deteriorations?
Wow. Well, you know, it's funny because we just went through this with this movie, Household Saints, and I've told audiences it's never looked better. This 4K restoration, it looks pristine. But I do understand and appreciate what you're saying about the 35 millimeter prints. I think it's, I think both need to be held on to, you know, if possible. I mean, there were so many things we were able to do with the restoration in terms of color, in terms of really nuances that film itself just didn't afford us. Because at a certain point you have to stop with film because you're going to just, you know, you have to stop the color playing because you are going to destroy the negative. So yeah, I appreciate both. I think both need to be preserved. I know that's not a definitive answer, but
I mean, but if you were to release a film, would you release the crappy version and the restored?
no, I think I would not release the crappy version. I think the crappy version is nice, but
yeah, as you know, quaint and interesting as it is to see a scratched up old 35 millimeter print, it actually gets annoying after a while. I mean, really, when you want that stuff to disappear and you want the movie to be the movie. You know, I mean, the last thing in the world. I mean, it's like listening to an old vinyl LP that's all scratched up. You know, it's like you just, you know, wouldn't you rather just hear the music?
Yeah, the original filmmakers actually don't want the scratches. So, when they restore them, you always wonder, you know, these are sacred, what liberties do they take? But they always take that one. They just can say universally. However, some movies, the scratches are intentionally put in there, like Death Proof, Tarantino's. And more recently, I think Alexander Payne, The Holdovers, a little bit of scratchy stuff in the beginning.
over here, I'm going to take one over here.
Big proponent of physical media. What is the role of boutique companies, Blue Criterion, Flicker Alley, King of Order? Specifically, I cite the Film Noir Foundation's relationship with Flicker Alley. They've been doing some really good work. The role of boutique labels.
Well, they believe there's still a business there. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. It's mostly collectors these days. You know, the vast majority of people just don't have machines to play them on anymore. So there's nobody who makes Blu-rays or DVDs that are mass-produced anymore. You will not find them in a Walmart. You will not find them in a Best Buy. You know, it's all done via little mom-and-pop stores that, you know, are cinephiles who are running the place, and/or through Amazon. And they're all made on demand. There's machines that, when you order a Blu-ray of a movie now, like from Amazon, they manufacture that Blu-ray just for you. That's the machinery that they've got. They don't mass manufacture them anymore.
Yeah, and to give you an idea of numbers, right, talk about in front, we met with a DVD distributor for Household Saints, and he said that if they could do 1,000 units, it would be really that's their benchmark for a good number in all of France. So it's not huge, but I'm with you. I think if I think that physical media is the only way you can actually own it. I mean, we've said this. That's the only way you can decide when you're going to see it. Right.
What's so cool about them too is now they've got these extra features. The commentary, the behind the scenes, some of them you can find on the internet, but not always. And for me, I don't know if it's a theme that I have, but sometimes it's nice to know that something's spinning.
There you go. We got this gentleman here.
I love the phrase distribution indifference. But putting the whole issues aside of chasing down rights with independent companies that fold, isn't a big part of the problem that the major players are very much narrowing the band of what they deem preservable and watchable. And there's a whole pantheon of stuff where the rights are very clear and the materials are available that just will never get the financial resources to keep them in a state-of-the-art mode.
No, that's absolutely right. The major studios have libraries in some cases of thousands and thousands of titles. And the ones that are kept in circulation are maybe 0.5% of what they own. So it's, and the deep catalog, the stuff that would be, right now the only place you can see any of that stuff is on Turner Classic Movies. I mean, they're the only ones who actually put a little bit of money and effort into finding like lesser seen titles and doing the bare minimum to make a high definition master that they can use on the channel. For a long, long time, they didn't even bother with the high definition part of that. They were, it's only in the last 5 or 6 years that TCM is actually showing all high definition movies.
Yeah, I mean, I like to say, and why do they do this, you say? Well, because they have a spreadsheet, and MGM sells their spreadsheet to Amazon for billions of dollars, and it's advertised it all over, which is why some young person out there, and I mean young, out in this audience, think about the copyright law and think about something that I like to call use it or lose it, because that's my thing that I will, I would love to see that happen, because it's too long for movies. I generously call it distributor indifference, but when I talk about my films, I call it hostage taking. Okay, I've got a couple of those hostage situations. Termination of copyright is one thing you can do, but you've got to wait 35 years, and you got to be able to spend $15,000 on an attorney to do it. So, anyway, yeah, I think we're supposed to be wrapping. I'm going to say again, check out this. Thank you.